So, what's it like as an African American female to decide that being in relationship with her mother is toxic, that is causing difficulty in her health, who has to decide, is there something wrong with me or is there something going on with her? And there's definitely something going on in this relationship. Well, my guest today has decided that she's going no contact with her narcissistic mother. Today, we're going to talk about what would make her make that decision. My guest is Miss Mara Alexander. I am your host, Tisha, your midlife makeover maven. Welcome. So, Miss
Hey,
Mara Alexander from the YouTube channel, Let's Talk About It with Mara. Mara, you made a bold move, one that I'm sure there are other women who contemplated. I'm sure that you didn't take that decision lightly, but I want to get into it. Like, let's get into your background. Let's talk about how you got here. So, can you share a bit about your background, your upbringing, tell us who you are, and let's get into it. Let's talk about it, Mara.
yes, sounds good. Thank you for having me here. So yes, my name is Mara, and I decided to go no contact with my mom last year, a month before Mother's Day, actually. I grew up as the only child. My mom in the beginning was, I looked at her as I can say my superhero, when I was young, 3, 4, 5. But as I got older, and as I was going into my preteens to young adulthood, everything just kind of switched. And I think a lot of that has to do with me becoming more independent. When you go up as a kid, you start to kind of have your own ideas, and you kind of start to kind of blossom and learn who you are. And when I look back on my childhood, I noticed that abuse started to definitely happen around that time, and it took me a while to kind of really resonate with that and kind of look back at that.
That's interesting because based on your description of, a narcissistic mother, doesn't it happen generally around the time when, girls start to get into
Yep.
their preteen years and they start to
Yep.
have their own voice? What kind of things
Yes.
were happening for you at that time?
Well, I was becoming independent. I wanted to express myself. I was building relationships with other people. And yes, narcissistic abuse gets worse as you get older because that's when they get that fearfulness that they can no longer control you.
Mhm.
My mom was was jealous of me having friends even at 12, 13 years old. She would be intimidated when I would have connections with other people other than her. She was very critical on my body, how I looked. When my body started to change, she became a bully. And that's when I noticed she started to kind of project herself onto me. Even small achievements, graduations were always miserable. She had to kind of steal that spotlight, I've noticed. But, you know, when you start to become independent, or when you start to kind of branch out, because they have this very toxic codependentness about them, and they have to be needed, because you are their supply. You make them feel special. So I think when I started to get older and I was kind of starting to kind of explore and become the young girl, woman as I was trying to be, she got threatened by that.
Interesting. That's interesting. So, we talked a little bit just about your early experiences. What did that feel like for you to have a mom where was it something that you were able to identify early, or was it just something felt off? What was that like?
I'm glad you asked that because I thought it was normal. Like I thought it was just me. Being waking up every day, being called out my name, being called fat and bees and stuff. I had to get up the next day and go to school. When I became a young adult in my early 20s, I was very depressed. And at one point I was starting to become suicidal. And then I
Mm.
told myself, I need to go to therapy. I need to go to therapy. So I went to my mom and was like, I want to go to therapy. I'm not happy and I don't know why. And I know she was threatened by that too. But when I went to my first therapy session, and she was like, "So how was your day?" And I'm like, "Oh, I woke up. My mom called me a B. She called me fat." And she was just like, "Wait, what?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's normal, right? Like, that's my norm." And from there, that's when my therapist at the time, we started going deep into everything. And then I realized my mom is the problem. I'm not happy because I'm being abused.
Okay, pause for a second. That just, Monique in Precious just flashed through my mind. Did you watch that movie?
Mhm. I did. I
Yeah.
actually went with my mom to the movies to watch that movie
Oh, so
when it first
let's
came
talk
out.
about that. Like, what's the conversation after watching that movie with your mom?
My mom, she has her experience of abuse herself. My grandmother was an alcoholic. My grandmother was extremely abusive. So I actually remember going to the movies and watching that with her and seeing her get emotional. But I remember when my mom and I used to get into arguments, I used to call her mommy dearest because that's how she used to act, like a mommy dearest. And it is so ironic when you see these movies and you don't even realize how you resonate. And I think even with narcissists, they don't even have the capability to connect themselves to being that type of person, because all they do is think about themselves. And when she was watching a movie, she was just thinking about the stuff that she's been through. But I don't even think she was even able to compartmentalize, like, I might have some similar traits to Monique.
So we got to pause here because there's a couple things I want to unpack. The first is you said that she had some early abuse and the
She did.
movie was triggering for her. And I had a
Mhm.
conversation with a therapist the other day when I was interviewing her. And one of my questions was, let's talk about how mothers who have, experienced some narcissism or the mother wound, like how are they impacting their children? And you just said something that she may not have even realized that
Mhm.
she was causing you harm. And though
Yeah.
sometimes you think, and I think that's part of it, right? Is that we
Yeah.
are unconscious as to how we interact with other
Right.
people. So I have to imagine for you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is you watch this movie and you're like, oh, great, we can open up a dialogue about
Right.
how we may have experienced this in our relationship. And did you have a conversation with her about that?
Mm-mm. No, I didn't have a conversation. My mom is also a person who is not really emotionally opened. I mean, when I was young, I always felt like I was her therapist. I mean, she would tell me about the stuff that happened to her. But I remember when we went to go see that movie, one, I didn't even really enjoy seeing the movie because I know her energy was definitely shifting. So I didn't really get a chance to have that dialogue with her. I was always the observer. So I didn't notice, her crying, and I didn't notice like her mood kind of switched. After the movie happened, she actually was kind of picking on me after the movie. But I think now when I look back on it, when you are dealing with someone who is narcissistic or hasn't really done their own healing, they project, you know, what what they're feeling or what they experience. But me and her didn't have a conversation with it, but I definitely did um observe it. I remember her because she also read the book, and I remember her reading the book and kind of talking to me about the movie and how it resonate. But when we went to go see the movie as a mother and daughter, it was really no like bonding or connection of, wow, we just saw this very traumatic, abusive, movie. But even at that moment, we still weren't even able to kind of bond in that on that emotional level.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we hear the word narcissist and it is like kicked around a lot, right?
Yeah.
I really want you to, for our audience, describe what your experience was more than the term itself. You talked a little bit about her calling you names.
Hmm.
Um, she had difficulty with you having other friends. You talked about you being her supply.
Hmm.
Now, in another panel where we discussed, I came up with the term emotional incest, and you just hit it when you were talking about you were your mom's therapist. So, or you felt like it, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about how that showed up for you.
Being my mom's therapist was I was never in a safe space to show my emotional needs, but I was able to kind of take all of hers in and have so much compassion for her. And that's why for me it was so betrayal, because it's like, how can this person do me, treat me so badly when I've was always her supporter, and my mom used to tell me stories about her past, and I remember being 8, 7, 6, and her telling me these stories, probably which I wasn't even old enough to even hear, and my heart used to break. And I think, like, it made it so confusing, because when I left her house, I was afraid to leave her by herself. Because I'm like, she doesn't have anybody. She's been through so much. If I leave her, who else would she have? And I think that kind of made, because when I hear that, I think about trauma bonding. You have that trauma bond connection with them, and you feel like you have to be their savior. Even at times when I was older, I felt like I was her man too. I was
Mm.
responsible for finances. She just looked at me like she didn't have a significant other, but I felt like I was the best friend. I was a therapist. I was kind of like, I felt like I was her husband. One time she cursed me out because I didn't tell her eyebrows looked nice when she got her eyebrows done. That's like when I think about, you getting your hair done, and your man doesn't compliment you, you get an attitude. And she did that with me. And so it definitely made me confused, and I developed limerence. It was hard for me to speak up for myself. Even to this day, I'm still learning how to even know how I feel, because some days I don't even know what I'm feeling.
Oh, wow. Okay, we're gonna keep on going. All right. So you decided that you were going no contact, and that is a significant decision, right? So can you describe for us the factors or events that led you to finally make that choice?
Yes. Before I went no contact with my mom, I haven't seen my mom in almost 7 years. I left her house when I was 22, no clothes. She was kicking me out of the house. She was controlling me with money. At that time, I was working, going to college, and it was torture. So I ended up leaving her house. I would only talk to her through text message. Every time she called me, I wouldn't answer unless it was an emergency. But we still had that, like, I think it's called gray wall kind of communication, where it was just, but one thing I've learned, narcissists will control you even if you giving them a speck of communication. Even though we were texting, she was still controlling me. If I didn't text her right, text her back right away was a problem. During the holidays, if I didn't text her at like 6 a.m. to tell her Merry Christmas when she wanted me to hear it, it was a problem. And one day she texted me, and this was one of her ways of manipulation. She told me, um, when you went to therapy back then, you were so smart. And when she told me that, anybody else would be like, wow, thank you. I didn't look at that as a compliment, because when I was going to therapy, she was calling me crazy. She was calling me crazy to the point that I would cry. She was gaslighting me. So when she texted me that last year, something in my heart and my spirit didn't sit right with me. So I responded back and was just like, so why were you calling me crazy? What's the change now? What's the change now? And then that mask slipped off.
Mm.
That mask slipped off, and she gaslit. I never said that. No, I was just talking hip hop talk. No, you're looking at the wrong way. And in my mind, I'm like, this lady hasn't changed. She will never change. She is controlling me, and she is putting on a mask because there's a little bit of communication in that crack. She still kind of control me. And then I thought to myself, I have to go no contact.
Wow.
Like, I don't deserve to be abused. I don't deserve to be manipulated. And it kind of was like a epiphany. And I started to look at the relationships that I had with guys and friends, and everything just went back to her. And I thought to myself, I have to go no contact. And I just went cold turkey.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. Oh. All right. So this is going to go to the next question then. How did your decision to go no contact impact your mental and emotional well-being initially? And how has it evolved over time?
So I definitely had guilt. I still struggle with the guilt. I mean, I went no contact with her maybe like a month or a few weeks before Mother's Day. So, when Mother's Day came around, I was just having severe anxiety. I'm thinking to myself, like, oh my God, I'm this terrible person. What am I going to do? But at the same time, I felt relief. I felt relief. I did. I felt like I had control. I had anxiety because of the guilt, but it felt good to not have that pressure to reach out to her, you
I
know?
did you have anxiety like, prior to going no contact, did you have anxiety feeling like, oh, I should call her, I should have a
Oh,
conversation?
yes.
Let's talk
Yes,
about
girl, when
that.
I mean my mom and I, oh, child, before I would even try. Okay. Before I even would reach out to her for the holidays, some days I would call for the holidays. I used to have zero anxiety. I would have to schedule out a time when I wanted to call her. I would say, okay, I'm gonna call her at 9 o'clock on Christmas Day so I can get it over with. And if she keeps going and going, I'm gonna lie and tell her I gotta work. I gotta pick up. I picked up a shift. I can't stay on the phone with you. I got cramps. Trying to find any way to say Merry Christmas, love you, bye. But it would give me this so much anxiety. It would be to the point where she'll be talking, I will have her on mute, and I would just be walking around in my apartment like, oh my God, I can't wait to get off this phone. I can't wait to get off this phone. Um, so when I decided to go no contact, I felt like I finally got my power back, Like I get to control who I decide in my life and who doesn't bring me peace.
So you
But I
mentioned
have anxiety.
I'm sure. What was Mother's Day like for you? Choosing a card, choosing a gift. Let's talk about that.
Mother's Day was always me walking on eggshells. Mother's Days, even her birthday, it was always walking on eggshells because it's like nothing really pleased her. She would always say Mother's Day was a trigger for her. So I didn't know if I should go all out, what card I should give her. I remember one Mother's Day, we did get into an argument. I don't remember what it was, but it was like, you would think those type of holidays you'll be happy and you want to spend time with your mom, buy her things. When it came down to Mother's Day, with any holiday growing up, was just not fun. I don't know what to get her. You give her something. One time I was afraid to tell her happy birthday, and she snapped at me and was like, why are you acting so scary? And I'm like, because you say you don't like the holiday, so if I act excited for it, you get upset. If I don't, you get upset. So it was like I didn't know which way to go.
I know with my dad, for Father's Day, you going through the cards and you like, oh,
Mhm.
you were so good and life was wonderful because of you. I'm like, this is a lie. I could never find a card that was honest about the relationship. I
But you're
literally
lying to
before
yourself.
my dad passed, I had
Yeah.
Father's Day cards for years that I just didn't mail. I bought them because I felt like I was
Wow.
obligated to do it,
Yeah.
but mailing them,
Yeah.
I was doing passive aggressive stuff. Like I know I'm supposed to, but I can't.
Because deep down, you know the real deal.
It ain't the truth. Like,
It ain't the
when
truth.
you start wanting to heal your own self and wanting to live in your own truth, it's stuff you
Yeah.
can't do stuff that just is out of alignment. So
Yeah.
interesting. So let's talk about, you did say that you're an only child.
I grew up
Tell
as the
me.
only child. Actually, it's 6 of us,
Oh goodness. Okay,
but I
so is
was the
that on
only
your
one who
dad's
lived.
side? The only
Um, yeah, I mean, we were actually adopted. My
okay.
mom was a recovering addict.
Okay.
So we were all in the system, but she was only able to get custody of me. Lucky me. So my other siblings were actually adopted. Oldest was adopted by my aunt, and then my others were adopted by a family.
Okay, so this is another layer. We got to
Yeah,
unpack it.
sorry.
Did you know that growing up? Did you know you
Yes.
had siblings?
Yes, I did. We had visitations when I was young, my siblings.
So, okay, so let's just keep it real, right? that's its own story where your
Mhm.
siblings are probably you wondering, is there some jealousy with them that I actually got
That
to be? Because no
no,
matter how
it
toxic a
is.
relationship is with a parent, the one who's not raised with the parent always
Mhm.
somehow feels that they got slighted.
I'm
Um,
glad you mentioned that because that's actually the dynamic, but that'll be a whole gear. Because I have a second oldest sister who she knows how abusive my mom is, but you still have that jealousy and mom chose you, didn't choose me. But in with my eyes, I'm like, y'all the lucky ones. I wish I was adopted. Because actually, when I left my mom's house at 22, I went to go live with my siblings and their adopted mom, and my mom didn't even know about it. I went to go live with them when I left at 22.
okay, we ain't gonna go down that road. Uh, but my conversation, the question that I really was going,
Sorry.
and we can loop back around if you want to talk about it, but
Mm,
deciding to go no contact, what was the impact on your relationships with your family? Now, I heard you. So I had one thing in my mind when I heard you say you were raised as the only child. Now knowing that there were other siblings, and then of course there was some, addiction involved.
yeah.
How so you're already in a situation where your relationships perhaps with them was not the strongest. So
hmm
what was the impact on those relationships when you made that decision?
To be honest, even though we were all separated, my siblings all know the dynamic of my mom. My mom was very abusive to them. Even when they tried to build a relationship with her, especially to my oldest sister, I love her to death. She's extremely strong. She even tried to, she stepped up even at 18, 19 when we were all. But me going no contact with my mom, they were extremely supportive because regardless of the animosity or whatever we have towards each other, we just know that mom, Stephanie, nobody really wants to kind of be near that because it's just toxicity, abuse. So when it comes down from me going no contact, 10 tones down, they're supportive.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Oh,
Mhm.
wow. All right. So, healing, being on your healing journey from a toxic relationship in and of itself is always
Yeah,
difficult. I can
it
imagine with
is.
it being your mom, it's
Yeah.
worse, right? So, can you share like some of your key milestones or strategies that kind of helped you in the healing process that kind of helped you were moving along on your healing journey?
For me, number one is therapy. I just started EMDR therapy in December because I do have complex PTSD. I suffer from depression. I have anxiety. So being in therapy is just like key. Being in community with other women who have been, if not the same thing that I've been through, but similar or even the same, because I follow a few women who speak about narcissistic abuse. So that has definitely helped me on my journey of healing. And to be honest, I wouldn't say I'm at a point of isolation, but I am in a state by myself, but I think is extremely helpful because I'm able, one, to tap into myself. I'm able to kind of analyze things about my past, about my life, even my toxic traits. Because when you grow up in abuse, you get toxic traits, you know. So it gives me a chance to kind of do some shadow work and heal the harm that I've been through, reprogram my mind, and get rid of the toxicity that was embedded into me, and just kind of just start my life the way that I deserve. I kind of look at my life like I'm a phoenix in a way, like I'm being rebirth. That's how I look at it. Like because when I think of abuse, I think of there's this book called The Girl on the Milk Carton, and it was about a girl who was kidnapped. And then she found out her whole life was a lie. Like her parents weren't who they really were. That's kind of like when I think about abuse. Like I was kidnapped. Now I see the truth and I'm going to regain kind of my identity, you know?
Oh,
So so
that's
that's kinda like sorry.
no, no, go ahead. That's
That's kinda
deep.
like
That's
yeah,
deep. It's
like
it's almost like you're like it's a before and after, right? So we all have
yeah.
the dash, and you have this life that was toxic, but you're saying I
Mhm.
want to rebirth I want to do whatever I can to nurture myself into a
Yeah,
healthy space. Thank goodness that we're in a space for social media and we're able to
yeah,
have these conversations because prior to
yeah,
now, a lot of it was taboo. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming, or I don't want to assume anything. I know in my own healing journey, it is so relieving to have other people put language to your experience. Meaning,
Yes.
that's exactly how I felt. Oh,
Right.
yeah, this is not just something that I've experienced on my own. This is something that other people have experienced.
Yeah.
I'm not
I'm not
crazy.
alone.
Or
Yes.
I always knew that in the bottom of my heart, but I didn't know how to articulate it, or I didn't know what that
Yeah.
meant. Right. So
Yes.
it's kind of twofold for you. It's like you found a community to unpack it, right? As
Yes.
you're healing, right? And you're moving perhaps towards choosing healthier
Yes.
relationships moving forward.
Yes, because I have codependency. I go to code meetings, because when you grow up in these type of environments, you do develop codependency. So me being on my own helps out with me kind of learning who I am and going through that healing process, but being in community, a healthy community also helps because you're not alone, and I think it's like a good balance.
So let's talk about CODA. What does CODA stand for?
So yes, Coda Anonymous. Don't know the exact on is breakdown on the top of my head, so please
I
forgive
believe
me. But
it's
it
I believe it's
uh,
Codependence Anonymous.
yes, Codependent
Okay.
Anonymous. It's
Okay.
a 12-step program,
Okay.
and it's kind of like if you would go to an NA or AA program, and it's just people from all over who have codependency, who grew up in abusive households, who even suffer from addiction because substance abuse is codependent behavior, and we just come together and we we go through the steps, we share our experiences, and it's been amazing because it lets me know, one, I am not alone. I hear people share in these meetings and they're just saying stuff like I feel like I hear myself talking.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it's a really good resource, and I think community is definitely a good healing, a good healing for me, being in community.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So establishing boundaries is crucial.
Yeah.
So for folks who've decided that they're not fully going no contact, right?
Hmm.
Um, and people who are maybe moving towards that, what does your boundaries look like? Because to me, I feel like boundaries like a muscle and it gets
Yeah.
stronger over time. But what was that boundary journey like for you?
When I decided to go no contact or before?
Up
Up
to
to
deciding to go no
um
contact and what has happened since.
So, me and boundaries is something that I'm learning because I didn't have any. But I know before I went no contact, I was on that strict of if my mom called me, I didn't answer. It was only through text message. We got into the phone call thing kind of, I wouldn't say by accident. My brother passed away about a year ago. So that kind of opened that door for phone call because of funeral arrangements and stuff. But I remember at times she would text me at like 6 a.m., 7 a.m. on the holidays. Girl, I'm still in bed. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. And she would tell me, "Oh, Samara, it's 8 a.m., 7 a.m. You're not going to tell me Merry Christmas?" And I remember I told her, "Do not do that. I know it's the holidays, but you don't tell me to reach out to you on your time. That's not cool. Don't do it." And she did it anyways because narcissists don't care about boundaries. Um, they don't care. But being firm and little things like that help me because those baby steps kind of scope you into kind of getting your voice. I know for a fact when I went no contact with my mom, I also went no contact with a toxic friend I had for 10 years because I realized that relationship was toxic. The boundaries were crossed, and I'm gearing towards going no contact with my toxic job, leaving my toxic job because you start to realize all the relationships and the connections that you have, even dating. When it comes down to dating guys, I have the worst experience because I was seeking validation. I didn't have the self-esteem. We all talk about the pick me term. I'm a recovering pick me, because I didn't love myself.
Right.
I
Right.
didn't know how to. And I was seeking love and acceptance and all this from guys, friends, family, work and being abused. But when I went no contact with my mom, that's when I realized I'm gonna learn how to set a boundary. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm gonna learn. It's a work in progress, but I'm learning.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. That was very vulnerable. Um, so supporting others in a
Yeah.
similar situation is empowering. And you talked about, being in community, you talked about your
Mhm.
code meetings. Let's talk a little bit about your YouTube channel and what was the thought behind Let's Talk About It with Mara, and how are you using that platform to help other women?
So when I first decided to start a YouTube channel, I was just like, who am I to kind of come on here and talk about certain things? Because I felt like I needed to be at a certain level on my healing journey. I didn't want to come on my podcast and just be preachy. But then I thought to myself, I have a lot to say.
Hmm.
I have a lot to say, and the things that I've been through is real. So I'm just going to speak. And even in my videos, I say, I'm talking about this while I'm going through it in the moment. I'm not a professional. I'm not like, this is what you should do. This is how this should, because I'm still learning and I'm still going through the motions. So my YouTube channel is kind of like a journal in a way.
Hmm.
But then it's also a way for me to kind of share my story because I know I'm not the only one. And
Hmm.
I know what I have to share is important,
Hmm.
and it feels good to speak and to say, this is what happened to me and it's okay, you're going to get through it.
That's beautiful. I say often, I am not a therapist. I'm just a girl that's been through some things and got a few words to say
Hmm.
about it, right? And
Hmm.
I don't think that we really do realize how healing it can be, because you just never know. I know that there were times when I really needed something, and because someone,
Yeah.
used their voice to, vocalize something that they had either gone through or experienced, it really was helpful in that
Yeah.
moment. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you for sharing that. So we talked about some of the tools and resources that you've used. You mentioned the Codependence Anonymous
Mhm.
meetings. You said something about EMDR therapy. What exactly is that?
So EMDR therapy is like a eye movement decentralization processing. So basically, what it does, if you are somebody who has PTSD, complex PTSD, it helps because it helps you restore and reprocess your trauma. One of the main symptoms of complex PTSD is having emotional flashbacks. So I could be, I don't know, going grocery shopping or just going about my day, and then I'll have random flashbacks about something that happened to me in the past, and I can feel those emotions even
Mm,
if it happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and then all of a sudden that hurt pops up that, you know, I'll just feel it at that moment and that will just change my whole entire day.
mm,
I'll get triggered easily. So EMDR therapy is different techniques. My therapist, we use the tapping movement. Well, she'll have me think about a memory, and then she'll have me do tapping, and then she'll say, okay, now I want you to think about that memory, but I want you to say to yourself, I am worthy, I am capable. So I will do the tapping while I'm thinking about that memory so I can reprocess that memory and kind of separate the negativity away from that memory. So it's really good if you are somebody who has trauma, PTSD, even depression, any form of trauma is definitely helpful.
wow. Okay. Woo.
It's triggering, but it works.
Wow.
And I actually heard about it from another Black woman who grew up with a narcissistic mother, and she mentioned EMDR therapy in one of her videos, and I was like, yeah, I definitely gotta look into that.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So we talked about, your relationships and going no contact, but what about society, the societal stigmas about going contact with your mom? Like what are those and how do you deal with them?
So when I was able to kind of pinpoint the issues with my mom, I was able to kind of look at the Black community as a overall, and I started to see the dysfunction. I'm like, listen, these generational curses and all this stuff, like, listen, I'm like, some of us are hot ass mess. I'm sorry. So it's like when I think about society, I don't really let it get to me. honestly, because I know you hear, "Oh, honor thy parent," and, you have people say, "I don't it doesn't matter what your mom does to you, you gotta be in community with her." I cut anybody who says that to me, I cut them off. You gotta go. Any enablers, you have to go, but I don't let society or itself kind of pressure me in it, because it's like they're part of the problem. Okay, y'all are part of the problem, especially in the Black community. We have is a lot of issues within the community. You have a lot of us who are undiagnosed, mental illness that we probably have or don't know that we have PTSD and don't even know that we have it, and we are conditioned and programmed to take abuse. Even Black women struggle, love. We are conditioned to take abuse. you
Mhm.
know
The
so when
ride
I
or
think about
die.
success, yeah, when I think about the society and all, I'm like, I ain't paying attention to y'all. Y'all can stay over there in that dysfunction. I'm gonna be over here healing.
And it's
Okay.
so funny, when we talk about addictions and how, like, narcissistic abuse. I did a video on my YouTube channel about how achievement can be used as addiction. So we've
Yeah.
got substance abuse, we've got these codependent relationships, that's a form of addiction, and we've got achievement where we've got to be,
Yeah.
the CEO, and we've got to have this great job, and we have to have all of this, and it is from a lot of it, like you say, unhealed
Yeah.
trauma. And
Yeah.
again, we're in these toxic jobs that's traumatizing us even more. And it becomes a cycle,
Hmm.
like a cycle down to the bottom, right?
Yes.
Of
Yes.
like healing, right? And you're absolutely right. I have a mentor. Her name is Leslie Vernick, and she wrote a book called The Emotionally Destructive Relationship. And the one thing that saves me often is and it's written from a biblical perspective about boundaries and recognizing these things when
Yeah.
you're in abusive situations. And one of the things she said, and even as we were talking about society and this honor your parent and all of that, what she says is God does not care more about the relationship than he does about you as the individual. And
Yeah.
so, as an individual, if you're being harmed by a relationship, you've got to pick yourself. You
You
can't
do.
continue to, throw your own self to the wolves to maintain a relationship that's not
It's
working.
sacrifice. Yeah, and sacrifice, and you can honor your parents and love them and still not be in communication with them. You can say a prayer for them every night. You can wish them well. You can honor and love your parent, or and still say, you know what, I can't be in contact with you though. I still love you though. I wish you the best though, but it ain't gonna happen. You gonna have to stay over there. You know.
It's interesting that you say that because my next question is about navigating the holidays. So we talked about Mother's
Mhm,
Day, we talked about
mhm.
Christmas. What is your plan when holidays come? Because they can be so triggering for people during the holiday season.
It can be triggering. I always, I'm learning how to feel my feelings. It's okay to feel sad when you in no contact during the holidays. It's okay to acknowledge that you feel sad. It's okay, because it's gonna happen. But for me, I learned to make my own traditions. This past Thanksgiving, I had a me's giving. I called it a me's giving. Um, I cook. Well, I ain't cooking next year because I was tired as hell cooking. I'm gonna order me some food this year. For Christmas, I went ice skating. I went to the movies. I make my own traditions, and I find ways to kind of make myself feel full, because I am full of abundant, right? I have things that I'm grateful for, even if that means snuggling on my couch and watching some corny Christmas movies, and sipping on some wine and just being at peace. Everything doesn't have to be the traditional way, of you got to be around X, Y, and Z. Or if you the person who have a friendsgiving, get
Mhm.
friends together, have a Thanksgiving, if you have that type of community, because everybody's different. But I make my own traditions. I do things that make me happy, and if I do feel a sense of sadness, I give myself that permission to feel that. Because when I did went ice skating this Christmas, did I have sadness? I did, because you see everybody together laughing, and kind of like, I had that sense of sadness. But then I told myself, like, I'm blessed and my peace of mind is important. And the fact that I was able to kind of get out the house and do something fun for myself, is just that's okay. But I
So
gave myself space to feel that, you know?
celebrating the small wins. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
because I
talk
haven't
about
went ice
forgiveness.
skating in years.
I went ice skating with my grandson for Christmas this year too. And I went one time
Yeah.
around. I was like, let me go on up here and sit down before I fall and bust my head. We went, we had a good time. He had a good time too. I was like, I ain't gotta keep on doing that. But it was fun. It's like creating the new traditions, just like you said. So let's
Mhm.
talk about forgiveness. Forgiveness is complex, right?
It
How
is.
how do you approach forgiveness, if at all, in the context of your relationship with your mother?
So I'm still in the midst of learning to forgive her. As the anger is still there, the resentment is still there, and the disappointment is still there. So I'm not going to sit here and like, oh, I forgive her. Like I understand her story, I understand her background, but when I was young, I always understood her story. I always understood her background. Now is me. So me means being
Child.
angry, being
Uh-huh.
upset, and being disappointment. I had a toxic therapist told me once, "Wow, you're not going to give your mom grace." I gave that lady grace my whole entire childhood, my whole entire 20s, and I was still being abused. I need to give myself grace. And I'm I told myself this. I think I need to learn how to start to kind of forgive myself in a way. You know,
Wait a
I
minute. We
it
gotta
starts with
pause right
me.
here. We gotta pause right here because I think that's critical, right? So when we have been in situations where we have not been well cared for, and
Hmm.
sometimes again we can turn that lack of care on ourselves. When you
Hmm.
say forgive yourself, that's critical. That's one of the things that I've struggled
Yeah,
with, and generally I found that self-forgiveness is the hardest.
it
What are the
is.
things that you feel like you need to forgive yourself for?
Um, for being in connections with people who just mistreated me and I didn't speak up for myself. And I know at the time I didn't know how to,
Mhm.
but I still have that shame and guilt within myself, learning how to, people pleasing, being a doormat. Like I said, I don't have the best relationships with guys. Even at a young age, it was just, just how I viewed myself and my self-esteem. Things happen, and me not just not knowing. So I'm learning how to kind of forgive myself for being in situations that I don't know. It's just hard.
No, I get you. I think you're in the
Yeah.
right. I can totally relate to what you're saying is that
Yeah.
when you have been taught that you don't matter, your voice don't matter, that
Yeah.
you find yourselves in relationships that feel familiar
Hmm.
to what you grew up with. It's like you
Yeah.
just didn't know any better, right?
You
And
didn't.
when guilt and shame are the behavior modification tools of choice by people who are supposed to protect us,
Yeah.
that's how you live your life. Ashamed,
Yeah.
feeling guilty. I can't stand up for myself because, they're not going to like me anymore, or they're going to
Hmm.
be upset. And, at a certain point, you just kind of have to say, and it's not easy, right? I'm
It's not.
important too. There are two
Yeah.
people in this relationship, not just me. And I remember, prior to filing divorce, and I remember my therapist saying to me, because she knew that there was trauma and there was all kinds of stuff
Yeah.
in my background. And she said, you matter too. You've got your
Yeah.
own trauma too. And
Yeah.
especially with me having been married to a soldier, right? Someone who'd been
Oh
off the
wow.
war. I was conditioned to believe it's all about the soldier. It's all about their trauma. It's all about the war. It's all about taking care of them.
Right.
It's all about their wounds. It's all about that was familiar to growing up in an
Right.
environment where you don't really matter there too. It's all about the one who has, in my family, it was all about the one who was in the biggest mess. So
Right.
as long as it's like you're a race to the bottom of who's got
Right.
the most dysfunction going on. And that's who
Right.
you're responding to. So if you still standing, and this other one over here is going to jail because of something, or something happened, and they kids in foster care, and this one don't come home,
Mhm.
and this one's, what you're learning is your dysfunction ain't as bad as mine, so get on over there
Mhm.
somewhere and sit down. And so you learn that you really don't matter.
Yeah, and you hear that a lot too with sometimes with toxic, parents is like, well, when I was growing up, I was being beaten and this and that. So they don't even think a verbal abuse is a thing. They don't even think financial abuse is a thing because it's like if you weren't getting touched or this and that, you wasn't going through nothing. Because when I went no contact with my mom, she even said another thing. She was like, I'm the victim. I've been through abuse. This started with me. This didn't start with y'all. That's what she said to me on voicemail. This started with me. I'm the one that should be a victim, you know?
And it's like, and when are you going to do your work?
Right.
Like, when are you,
Hello.
right? You older than me. When are you gonna do the work?
You
Like, you
brought
just
me
gonna keep
here.
on, you just gonna keep on treating everybody any kind of way, and you just never gonna do your
hmm
work, and that's just the excuse, and we're just supposed to
hmm
take it forever?
Right.
Like, come
Right.
on now.
Right.
Come
Come
on. Yeah.
on. We ain't doing that.
It's
Nuh-uh. Because I don't want to be a victim forever. You know?
That's it. That's it. So what advice would you give somebody contemplating or in the early stages of going no contact? Like they know something's off. They not really sure how to handle it. They're not really sure what to do. What would you say to them?
um, I would say in your best capability to center yourself. You know, sometimes I have to write stuff down. You write down the good things that happen, you write down the bad things that happen, and you compare the two. You know, what outweighs you know what I mean? If you can speak to a therapist, if you feel like you really don't know and you just need that kind of like someone to kind of blueprint it, because I'm grateful because if I would have never went to therapy in my early 20s, I don't think I would have ever separated myself from my mother. If
Mm.
it wasn't
You
for
were
that
completely
therapist telling me,
enmeshed.
I
Hmm.
was completely enmeshed. She was like, "Your mom, this is no." She was even coaching me and helping me get out the house. She was like, "Wear your sister's clothes. Leave. Leave." She was like, "Leave the clothes. Go." You
I
know?
remember
So
my I remember my therapist saying to me, because I kept moving. I just kept moving far, right? And I remember my therapist saying, well, you might be, hundreds of miles away, but you are still completely enmeshed in what's going on. And I'm like,
mhm.
yeah,
How?
that's
Then you like, I
right,
get it.
right? So,
Yes.
and I remember, folks wanted to come live by me. And I'm like, no, baby, these miles is my boundary. I
I
didn't
know.
know a better or different way to set a boundary. So I just left.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
used to say
Sometimes you
that,
got to.
yeah, codependent people do not have relationships, they hold hostages. The
Yes.
same is true with narcissistic people. It's like there's not a relationship,
Mm-mm.
there's no consideration. I remember when I was getting a divorce, and one of my best friends said, y'all weren't in no relationship. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is my husband. We're married. She
Right.
said, no, ma'am, that was not a relationship. It was you doing
Right.
what he wanted you to do until you couldn't do
Right.
that no more. The same is true. It sounds like with what was
Yeah.
happening with your mom. And sometimes when we're in those situations with self-centered,
hmm
at least, emotionally immature people or people who are used to getting their way, you think you're
Yeah.
in a relationship with people and you really are not. You're serving their
You're not.
needs.
You are. Even the love, because when my mom used to text me, she loved me. It used to make my skin crawl. Like
Mhm.
I wanted to just like it just felt so icky. One time I was on the phone with her and she was crying about me not seeing her. She was like, "You're my baby girl," and I just felt so disgusted by that comment because that's not love, that's abuse. What you are thinking love is not love. And like you said, it's not a relationship. You're getting your emotional needs met from me. I'm feeding your ego because I'm making you feel good. She was a person who was a recovering addict. She didn't have her kids. I was the one who kind of made her feel like a mom again. But
Mhm.
it was all from ego, all for her satisfaction, not. And
Ooh,
it wasn't love, it was ego.
child. It's funny. I had a girlfriend once who had a baby, and I watched the documentary with like Anna Nicole
Mm.
Smith, and she
Oh, I
was
gotta
talking
watch
about
that.
having a baby, and I have had a problem, and I couldn't identify it with women who chose to have children because they wanted love. I could not identify why that was so disturbing or upsetting for me. but it was. And it wasn't
Mhm.
until later that I understood that sometimes we have a hole in ourselves that we're trying to fill with
The void.
somebody else. Because here's what I knew. If that's the reason why you having a baby, when that baby can't perform, it's going to be a problem for that child.
Hello, you got it. You
I,
got it.
I'm not a therapist.
You
I'm a
got it.
woman that have been
You
through
got it.
some things.
You
All
got
right.
it.
So, how do you like envision your ongoing journey of healing and growth? And what aspirations do you really have for the future?
So I vision myself being able to take a leap of faith, being able to finally trust myself, because I notice when my discernment is on. I be peeping stuff, I be seeing stuff and learning how to trust myself. Even working on starting my own business. I never thought in a million years that I would think that, oh, maybe I can actually do certain things. If you would have told me this 5 years ago, I would look at you like you were crazy. Me start a YouTube channel, me move to another state, get my own apartment, like I just even talking to you right now, this is like huge, so I just envision myself um setting my own path, designing my own life, going by my own beat of the drums. And if I make mistakes, that's okay, and I'll give myself the space to actually be make mistakes.
So, I think that that's amazing. And trust, right? One of the
Yeah.
things that we lose early on in our lives is our ability to trust ourselves, our
Yeah.
intuition, other people. What
Mhm.
kinds of things are you doing now? Or you've talked about this. A better question is, how do you know now that you trust yourself more than you have in the past?
Well, for once, I mean, I lived in New York and I decided to leave everything and kind of move to another state. And, you know, I was able to finally get my first apartment and do all these things. And this is where therapy comes into play because with my therapist, she's like, you've done incredible things. Like you're here surviving. And the fact that I'm just here right now where I'm at is just confirmation that I can trust myself. That I can, that you know, I was able to walk away from people, places, things that no longer serve me. And even when I make mistakes, let's say it's a situation where I didn't trust myself and the inevitable happened and something happened. I'll think back on it instead of doubting myself, saying, "You know what, Samara, at that moment, you kind of saw it, but you didn't, trust yourself. But that's letting me know I can. You see it. You see it clear view, like kind of just switching that thought process of even though I did make a mistake or I did trust that person or I did open that door and something happened to let myself know, well, what was the flags that you saw before you decided to walk through that door? See, you can trust yourself. See, you know what to do. You know what to look for, you know? And just, therapy is definitely helping me with the trusting for sure.
As I listen to you speak, you know what word comes to mind for
But
you? Grace.
yeah.
Grace. That you're allowing yourself some grace and you're
Yeah.
allowing yourself to say, dang, I've been through hell and back and I've still survived. And
Mhm.
everything that was meant to destroy me, I'm able to now use that for good. And I'm able
Yeah.
to have some grace within myself and I'm able to have grace with other people who are struggling. And bigger than that, what I hear is you
Yeah.
having even grace for your mother, even though you've decided that being in relationship with her is not what's best for your own mental health.
Yeah. And
This
yeah,
has been a wonderful conversation. And what I want
it
to say
has.
to you is thank you so much for sharing your journey. Thank you for trusting
You
me. Thank you for being open to my questions and really, knowing that oftentimes, you and another sister are on the same journey and you don't even know it. Fate
don't
kind of
even
brought
know
us
it.
together And
You
I'm so
sure
glad.
did.
I'm so glad to know you. And we're going to keep talking soon. So
Yes.
for my
And thank you
ladies,
for having me.
you're welcome. In midlife, that you're navigating some relationships, the people who are put on this earth, so you think, to love you, care for you, look out for you, um, be able to meet your emotional needs, sometimes they just can't. And it
They
has
can't.
nothing to do with you or your worth.
You
Love on
got it.
yourselves, my sisters. Thank you so much, Tamara, for joining us here at the
Thank
Midlife
you.
Makeover Movement. Please like, share, and subscribe. We have some more incredible guests, and you have shared an incredible journey. And I'm so proud of you, Miss Mara. Mara,
Thank you.
let's talk about it with Mara on YouTube. Go check her out, everybody. I'm sure there's a gem for you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.